we kind of talked about the order. Where do you fit in the order of kids?
Uh, Clary is the baby, and Louis comes next, then me,
Okay.
and then Walt, and Arnie, Florence, Leona, Adeline, and Irv.
Okay.
So I'm the baby girl.
You're the baby girl.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
Well, you had asked me. You thought I would probably know more about the girls, but uh, I was a tomboy, so I just did things with the boys. I didn't really do much girl stuff. I did have a doll, but I didn't play with it all that much.
No.
I would go out in the woods with the boys, and we would hunt with our slingshots. I was going to tell you how we made the slingshots. We would go out and get a Y-shaped branch from a tree, and then we would cut a thin piece of rubber from an inner tube, and we'd take a tongue out of an old shoe, and we put that all together, and that's how we made our slingshots. And it was fun shooting stones
Yeah.
with the slingshots.
What did you shoot at?
Birds. Not that I ever shot a bird, but I don't know why we shot at birds. There wasn't a nice thing to do, but that's what we did.
Get them off the power lines.
Yeah. We didn't have power lines. No, we didn't have power lines.
Yeah. I remember Dad sharing a story about a stone that he threw and hit Uncle Walt. I think it was Uncle Walt.
No, a stone didn't hit Uncle Walt. I bit Uncle Walt.
Oh.
The boys pestered me because I was their little sister and I was just a pest to them. And they bothered me so much, and one time I bit him in the shoulder and I actually bit a piece out. He went to his death with that scar. Yeah, he did.
Oh boy.
But in being with the boys, we threw stones too. That was a game. And I remember one time there were chickens sitting on the sawhorse, and I threw a stone at that chicken, and I hit it in the head and killed it. And I was just scared stiff. I'd killed this chicken, and yet I knew I had to go in and tell my mother about it. So I went in, and she just came outside and got the chicken and chopped its head off and pulled its feathers and took dinner and something. We had chicken for dinner that day, and that's usually, we didn't have that for a weekday meal because our main meal of good meat was usually on Sundays, and so that was a special treat. I had killed a chicken for dinner.
On a weekday, no less.
On a weekday, yeah.
What were other dinners like?
Well, we always had plenty to eat because we always had a big garden, and we had potatoes and vegetables, and our mother canned a lot. Oh, the basement was just full of canned jars, and we didn't always have meat, and most of our meat was what the boys hunted. We always had venison or rabbit. We'd have chicken, and our dad butchered cows and pigs too. I just hated that when they did that. I just hated when they butchered. When they butchered pigs, our mother would go out there too, and they would catch the blood from, I don't know if my brothers talked about that or not. They would catch this blood in a big bowl, and she would make blood sausage. I just hated blood sausage, but our dad liked it and others liked it. But they used every bit of an animal when they butchered. The brains, we ate the brains. Our mother fixed them. I don't remember exactly how, but she fried, I think she mixed them with eggs and fried them, and we all liked them. Of course, the heart and the meat from the head was used in gritswurst, and I think you probably talked about gritswurst. Every part of the pig was used. The bladder was given to us to dry, and that we had a balloon for a while then. That was our balloon. That's how we had our fun. The tail was a plaything. We'd put a safety pin through it, and when people weren't paying attention, we would be sneaky and we'd pin that tail on behind somebody. So they'd walk around with this pigtail pinned to their clothes and didn't know it. But we made our own fun.
Yeah,
And
sounds like it.
of course, sausage, they made sausage, and to do that, they had to use the innards. And of course, that meant cleaning them out. And that was an awful stinky job. I can remember holding the gut there, and then we'd take a broomstick and push the inside, the yuck out of the, and then after that was cleaned out, we'd pump water, and the water would just have to flow through that gut, and just then it would soak in salt water, and it was, when it was finally used as a casing for sausage, it was clean. It was really clean, but it was a long process to get that done. Nowadays, people they wouldn't even think of doing such a thing.
Yeah. Did everyone in the family participate in that process?
Pretty much so,
Like an
yeah.
assembly line?
Pretty much so, because all of those who were of an age when they could. I just remember my helping our mother to do that. I don't know if the boys did or not, but the girls did. And then, of course, putting the hams in salt water to salt for a while before it went in the smokehouse to be smoked for bacon and ham. And talking about the smokehouse, I remember one time when we always had to keep putting corn cobs or whatever into the smokehouse to make smoke. And our mother had sent me out to put corn cobs on the fire in the smokehouse, and I was out picking up the corn cobs, and we had a rooster who was just a nasty fellow, and he jumped up on my head, and I couldn't get him off. I was so scared. I screamed and hollered, and our mother came and got him off and freed me from that. But that was an experience I'll never forget. We all, when we were old enough, had to help with the milking, and we'd hold the pail between our knees and milk. And I just remember our mother could just milk so fast. I don't know how she could do that. She just milked so fast. And but we all had to learn how to do that.
How old were you when you had to learn how to do it?
You know, I don't really know how old. We were young, because we had to learn to work when we were young. And the same with working in the fields. We had to help with that when they would haul hay. I don't know if the boys talked about that. They had the wagon that had what they called swings, 3 swings, and they'd put one on top of the other. Or no, they'd put the one down and the others were kind of rolled up over the uh, back. And they'd put the hay, somebody was on the ground forking the hay up onto the wagon, and somebody had to be on the wagon to be smoothing it, leveling it. Then when it reached a certain point, they'd take the second sling and spread it over the hay on the wagon and keep doing that. And there were 3 of them. So the hay got pretty high on the wagon. And we had to help with that. I remember as a girl being out in the field helping to haul the hay.
Did you just have working horses, or did you have horses that you could ride?
The horses that pulled the wagons and all, but we also had to ride them because we had fields of corn and potatoes that were planted so far apart or so, and they had to be cultivated. So in the summer, someone would, and it was the boys usually that would walk behind the cultivator, but a lot of the time I rode the horse, pulling the cultivator, and I'd ride the horse up and down these rows, and the boys would walk behind the cultivator, cultivating the weeds. In the hot summer sun, that was really hard, but that was one of the jobs we had to do. We did put a pillow on the horse so we could sit on the pillow. It wasn't so bad that
So you
way.
didn't have a saddle, you just had
No, no
just a
saddle.
pillow.
Mm-mm. Up and down the rows. But that was our job. And we'd go up and down this way and then up and down this way to clear the weeds out of those fields. And that was something for me it was Arnie and Walt and I that did that because Louie and Clary were younger yet. So that's work we did. And we would take quart jars of coffee out there because we drank coffee at an early age, and we'd have that sitting at the end of the row, and when we got thirsty, that's what we drank during the day.
Coffee.
Mm-hmm.
How did you grind your coffee?
We had one of those coffee grinders where you turn the handle and it grinds the coffee. Although when our mother shopped for groceries at the A&P grocery store, she would have it ground there, and that was better than grinding it in the. We used the grinder too to grind corn for our baby chicks. We had baby chicks, and that was another interesting thing. We would order the chicks from I don't know where, somewhere, and they would come by mail. The mailman would bring these baby chicks, and when we knew what day or close to the day that the chicks would be coming, we had to be sure to be at the mailbox because we had a long ways to go to get the mail. You know where the house is. We had to walk way down, way past where Gary lives, way down where that other curve is. So that's a long way. We have to go
So all
there.
the way up to Spruce Road.
Yeah.
Yeah, way out there.
Wow.
Not where Spruce Road starts, beyond that yet, further on Spruce Road. But we'd have to be there to get these chickens and carry them home, these baby chicks.
Were there a bunch of mailboxes there? Or that's just where yours was?
No,
Or
there
where
were more.
Everybody's in one place?
There were more there, but mailboxes in front of everybody's house, but there were more at that corner. Yeah. We had to go there every day, walk there to get the mail that was a long way in the winter, especially.
Oh,
Yeah. And then it came so that the mailman would drive up to the house once there was a good enough road for him to drive. He'd drive up to the house when he had the baby chicks. Yeah.
How many babies would you get?
How many what?
How many baby chicks would you get?
I don't even know. It was a big box full, and um, the car was so noisy. The postman's car was so noisy with all the beep 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 noises. But it was a fun thing to get those baby chicks, and oftentimes we had to keep them in the house because it was cold. So we keep them by the stove. Kind of a fun time of the year. You know, I've thought about that, and I don't remember everything about that. I know Irv had a bed, a day bed, and that was in what was the living room. And just seems everybody else was in that one bedroom. There were a couple of big beds in there, and I had a little bed in the dining room. And in those days, the baby always slept with our mother and dad until the next baby came along. That's just the way it was. Then when we got older, my sisters decided that they were going to put some beds in the upstairs, because the upstairs wasn't finished off at all. It was just very crude. So they cleaned a lot of stuff out of the upstairs, just threw it out the window, and carried it to the dump. But we had a bed up there and moved it right close to the chimney, because the chimney came up through the floor and up into through the ceiling. And so the heat from the chimney gave some warmth, but snow even came in through the windows because the windows weren't tight, and the snow would blow in through the windows. That was pretty cold up there. And we had this stone. It was called a soapstone. I think they used to use it on the sleds, on the sleighs. Well, that stone would sit on the stove all day at the far end of the stove, and it would be warm. And we would wrap it in paper, newspaper, and take it up and slide it all over the bed to warm the bed up at night, and then put the stone by our feet, and that's how we kept warm during the night. I just love that stone. I don't know if Aunt Linda and Uncle Louie still have it or not, but that was a wonderful thing. And we'd sleep three in a bed, which kept us warm too. And I remember my sisters decided they were going to make a closet in that one bedroom. And it was such a crude closet, but it worked. And we would a fun thing we did in that bedroom, because the beds were so close together, one person would lay on this side and one on that side, and we had so much fun putting our feet up against the one on the other side, and just to have fun exercising with moving our feet. Crazy games, but that's what we did. I really don't remember a whole lot about birthdays. I'm sure we had a cake for our birthday, but it wasn't a big thing that stands out in my mind. Holidays, Christmas was always very special because we had the Christmas Eve children's program at church, and that was a big thing, and we all always had a part in that. My part usually was singing. I had a part of singing, and I think it was Louie the first year he was going to have a part in the program, and he was supposed to say this little speech, a great big speech I cannot say, but I can welcome you today. And he got up in front and he stood there and he didn't say a word. He couldn't say a word. He couldn't say his little speech. But
Imagine Louis
the,
not being able to say a word.
it was we all always had a part in one of the Christmas programs I remember the most is when there were 12 of us little girls were angels, and in our old church we would get ready in the basement of the church, and then there was a door in the back where you came up the steps and around, and us angels were dressed in sheets. I don't remember how they did it, but we really looked like if we had wings. We held our arms up and all, and we sang. And that's one of the Christmas programs that I really remember as being special. But on Christmas Eve, we kids weren't allowed to go in the living room. There was an archway and the curtain was drawn, and we just couldn't go in that room because Santa Claus came that day, and he was going to come that day, and we just weren't allowed in there. And when we got home from the Christmas program, there was the Christmas tree all decorated, and it had presents under it. And we all went in there, and oh, what a delight that was. And the Christmas tree had candles, real candles on it. And our dad would light those candles. It scares me when I think about it. But he'd light those candles, and we would watch them burn for a while, and we would sing some Christmas carols, and then he'd blow those candles out because of danger of fire. And we never had many presents, but we always had at least one or more. Not big presents, not like today, but Christmas was such a special time.
What kinds of things would you get?
I remember one year I got a thing. It had colored sand in it, and it had pictures, and you put glue on those pictures and then sprinkled sand on that to make colored pictures. That was a special present that I got. And the one year I got a doll. I don't remember other presents, but I know that we always had something. But it was just such a nice thing, and our mother always made Christmas cookies. She always made cookies in the molasses cookies were big, huge molasses cookies. And she'd make sugar cookies, and she hid them away in the milk room. There was this room off the kitchen where the cream separator was and where the milk was stored, and she'd hide them away in there so we couldn't find them, and she gave them to us only when she wanted us to have cookies. But oh, it was such a fun time, and we would help her frost them and decorate the sugar cookies. But that was a real special time. But talking about the milk room, did the boys talk about that? After we did the milking and brought the milk into the house, there was this cream separator. We kids had to help do this too. We'd pour the milk into this big bowl at the top of the separator, and then someone had to turn this crank, and you'd get it going zoom, 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 zoom till it got going really fast, and you knew when it was going fast enough, and then I don't remember what it was, we'd have to turn some button or something, and the milk would come out one spout into a pail, and the cream would come out into a crock. This machine, this milk separator, separated the milk and cream. And then someone had to be there handy to take the pail away and to get the next pail ready for the milk. That's what we had to do morning and evening when we milked. It was one of the jobs. And then from that cream, we had this great big round butter churn that stood on the stand, and we had a handle. We would turn like this, and that churn would go around and around and around and around, and we would churn butter. And when it had turned into butter, we'd pull this plug and catch the buttermilk. And then there was this huge wooden bowl that the butter would be put into, and there was a huge wooden spoon about so big. We'd have to work that butter to work the rest of the buttermilk out of it. And then the butter was salted, and it was put into little crocks. And our mother and dad would take that on Saturdays and go to Alpena, and there was this store called the Black and White store, and they would sell their butter there. That's how they got money for groceries. And the cream, there was other cream, they didn't make all the cream into butter. Other cream was taken to this creamery. It was called Bedard's, and there it was tested for content, and they were paid according to the richness of it. And that's how they got grocery money too. And then went to buy groceries. And they had some private customers that they sold the butter to and sold eggs to. But it was always a Saturday job to go to Alpena. And of course, when kids could go along, it was fun, but most of the time we had to stay home. That was when I got old enough. That was the time when I had to scrub the kitchen floor and do the cleaning. And but usually they would bring a little treat, some kind of candy home for us. I don't know what the boys did during that time, but I know my job was to clean the house during that time. And in the early years, it was just a wooden floor that was a rough wooden floor, not smooth. And to scrub that on hands and knees, that was a big job. And then we kind of got smart, and we used an old broom instead of the scrub brush. And we'd use the broom to scrub and clean the floor. But it was always such a good feeling to have the house nice and clean when our mother and dad got home. And then as years went by and Adeline was working and earning more money, she bought linoleum for the kitchen floor. And that made it so much easier to clean. Oh, it was so much easier to clean that floor. But that was a Saturday job. Another Saturday job was to clean the lamp globes and fill them with kerosene. That was just something that was always done. I remember one time when I did that, I somehow broke the globe. And our brother Irv, till this day, it bothers me. It wasn't his business to do it, but he took me over his knee and he spanked me so hard for breaking that glass. And I don't know, it wasn't his job to do that. I haven't forgotten it because it hurt me so bad.
Yeah. How old would you have been?
I really don't know how old I was because we worked when we were little. We had to do jobs when we were little, so I really don't know how old I was when that happened.
So did you have chores every day or just on Saturday?
Well, the cleaning was on Saturday.
Oh.
We had to clean the kitchen and the dining room and all that. But the chores, the barn chores and those kind of chores, and of course dishes, washing dishes. We had a dishpan that we washed the dishes in, and you of course wouldn't remember this, but there was a bench that sat by the table, and I don't know, I think 4 or 5 of us sat on that bench. It was just a little bench like the one at Aunt Linda's house. But I'm sure there were 4 or 5 of us sat on that bench, and we never squabbled during a meal. We ate what was given to us and didn't complain, because if we complained, we got nothing. And we just learned to eat what was there. And when I talk about eating, and something else that was interesting was our school lunches. Did the boys talk about those?
Just briefly.
Much of the time, our school lunch was a lard sandwich. Lard with sugar on it. The sugar made it easier to eat. And oh, how I envied people who came to school with meat in their sandwiches. Oh, I just envied them. But it was good for us to, it taught us some good lessons. And sometimes at school, once in a while, the teacher would have a special day when she would call it an onion sandwich day. And everybody could bring onion sandwiches if they wanted, because then we'd all have bad breath. So that was onion sandwich day. Once in a while, she'd have a sauerkraut day, and somehow she'd bring sauerkraut with hot dogs in it. And that was special. We'd have a hot meal at school. Talking about school, Aunt Adeline worked at the house across from Lakeview School. It was Lang's house. And my first day of school, my dad took me to school. Usually we walked to school, but that first day he took me. And I was so lonesome. I ran away from school and ran across the street to where Aunt Adeline worked. And she had to bring me back to school. But I remember that.
You escaped.
What's that?
I said you escaped from school.
I escaped, yes, I did.
Aw.
And that school burned. For that day, it was a very lovely school. But one evening it burned down, and I don't know what was the cause of it. So then we had to go to the parish house by the church, where the church is, the old church. And we had school in that parish house. And that was a bit further along the way, so the bus picked us up and took us there. We didn't have to walk to that school. But the teacher hired me to start the fire every day in the furnace, because we would get there early. We rode the bus with the high school kids, so they'd drop us off, and I was hired to build the fire every day. And then, after a few years, that building caught on fire right during the day when we were in school, and it burned to the ground. And we moved down a little ways to where there had been a store, which was vacant, across from where Prevost lived. And so we had school in that old store, and I again was hired to build the fire in the furnace. So that's some interesting things for my school years.
I understand you were a mason when it came to the parsonage. You helped build that.
I did, and I have a picture. My dad laid the blocks, cement blocks, to build that, and I wanted to help, so I did. He showed me what to do, and there's a picture of me putting the, what do you call it?
Mortar or whatever?
Mortar, yeah. And laying
grout.
the cement blocks. So I was so glad that I had a picture. My pastor took a picture of me doing that. And Grandpa did such a good job. He was such a good mason. He built so many stone houses and cement block buildings. And I was just so proud that he built that parish house. And it's the parish house where we had our wedding reception. Yeah. So,
In your book, you talked about making taffy.
yeah, yeah, we did. That was one of those Saturday deals when our parents were gone to Alpena. And I got the house cleaned, and we decided that we would make taffy. So Louie and I were there. I don't know, Clary must have gone with our parents to Alpena. And we made the taffy, we boiled it. It was to the point where we could take it off the stove and let it cool enough that we could pull it. And I used a dish towel to carry the kettle off the stove and put it on the table. And when I pulled the dish towel away, Louie was right there too. I evidently had set the kettle on the towel, and it spilled the hot candy, and it spilled on Louie's hands. Oh, it was horrible. He screamed, and I didn't know what to do. I wiped it off as good as I could, but it was horrible, and I didn't know what to do. So I ran in the bedroom and crawled under my parents' bed, and I just hid there, and he screamed. And I don't know where anybody else was. It was just the two of us that I recall. And my parents came home, and he was screaming. And my mother took butter and rubbed on his hands, and afterwards I was told that was probably the worst thing to do, to put butter on there. So they turned around and took him back into Alpena to the doctor. His hands were just burned horribly. He suffered. Oh, it's on my conscience still that was just a horrible thing that happened. But it taught me a lesson. I wasn't careful. We didn't go to the doctor.
Right.
Yeah, we didn't go to the doctor. I don't remember ever going to the doctor till I got older. It just seemed, I think, that our mother knew what to do, and she doctored us with home remedies. I just don't remember going to a doctor till I got older.
What kinds of home remedies did she use? Do you remember?
I don't remember that either. You know, some kind of oil in our ears when we had earache. Our dad smoked, so he'd buy tobacco in these little bags that had the drawstring. She would put salt in those bags and put them in the oven for warmth, and put those on our ears if we had an earache. Cough medicine. She must have bought cough medicine. I don't know, but we would. She'd rub Vicks on us, and for really bad colds, she would put onions in the ashes on the stove so the onions would get hot. And then she'd put them, kind of wrap them up and put them in stockings. And then we'd put those stockings on our feet, and they felt that those onions would draw the cold, the croup out. I don't know if they did or not, but that was a remedy. And if we had a sore that was festered or whatever, there was a plant that grew real close to the ground. And she would take a leaf of one of those plants and rub it to get the kind of the juice flowing and put that on the infected sore and wrap it up, and that would draw the infection out. That's what I recall about doctors. We did have once a year a dentist would come to our school, and the dentist would take care of our teeth at school once a year. Never went to the dentist otherwise.
How many students were in your school?
How many kids were there? I don't know, maybe 30. We'd have Christmas programs at school too, and I remember where they'd string up wires and hang sheets over them to make a stage, and the students would be behind the curtain.
Were there separate classrooms?
Oh
in the
no,
school?
it was
Just
one
room.
one room.
One room and one teacher?
Yeah.
And did you have the same teacher for years at a time?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was her name?
One was, I remember, was Mrs. Skirky. One was Miss Simpson. I really can't remember all the names now. I can picture their faces, but I don't remember their names. But I taught in a one-room school too, so I taught all 8 grades at one time.
So how did you get your teaching degree?
Well, that's an interesting thing. We didn't have money for me to go off to college at that time. And my friends knew that I wanted to be a teacher, and my high school teachers, some of them encouraged me. And there was at that time what they called County Normal. It was a teacher training program, and they had it in a lot of counties. And so I checked into it to see if I could attend County Normal teacher training, and I was I was approved to be a part of it, and I could drive the high school bus. So the bus came by that time, we had a road past the house. We didn't used to have that road, but the bus came past, and I rode the bus, and it took me to that school. It was, I don't remember the name of the school. It was across the bridge in Alpena, and he'd take me there. It was our County Normal teacher training room, and then there was a room right next to it with students in it that we worked with. And that was a 1-year program. So I graduated from County Normal, and I thought I would never get hired into one of the consolidated schools, because they had just built the consolidated schools back at that time. They were just brand new. But friends said to me, and my teacher said, apply. Yeah, no reason why you can't get a job there. So I did, And I was just so surprised. I got hired to teach sixth grade, and one of my county normal classmates was hired to teach fifth grade. And we were just so thrilled to be working there. But after I graduated from county normal, I went to Central University right that summer for summer school. I don't know how I got the money to go to do that, but I did. I went for the summer, and while I was teaching, I took extension classes. I had to go to Alpena a couple nights a week in Central Michigan, sent teachers to teach us, and I did that each year. I was teaching, and in the summertime I always went for summer school to Mount Pleasant. And so I never did get a degree, but it was like with the extension courses and all, it was like a 2-year college training. And so that allowed me to teach, but I had to do continual study while I was teaching. And I really hadn't been far away from home at that time, so I was lonesome going to Mount Pleasant in the summertime and living there. It was, I had to do a lot of growing up, going to college.
Did your siblings go to college?
No, none of them went to college. Florence was the first one that went to high school. And then Arnie went, Walt went, but he didn't finish high school. I think Arnie finished high school. And I did. And Louie and Claire both did. Yeah.
So your older siblings, what grade did they go through?
It was just grade school. I think.
Then they worked after that?
Yeah, I don't know how far Irv went, if he went all the way through 8th grade, or Adeline either, I'm not sure. But yes, they worked early. Adeline, as you know, did housework, and she worked at my Grandpa Gerke's. That's my mother's dad. She worked for him quite a bit. I spent a lot of time there with her too. That was a wonderful, wonderful experience. But she worked for quite a few people in Alpena doing housework for the rich people. She, had to do the cooking and cleaning, and I can remember her telling about the dinner parties she'd have to serve, and she'd have to wear special clothes for doing that.
Would she stay there?
Yes, she stayed right there. Mm-hmm. Along State Street in Alpena. There were several places there that she had worked at, some of those big houses. But she was good at what she did. She was a good cook, and they really liked her. And then after she stopped doing that, she worked at what was called the Garment Factory, and she got an apartment in Alpena, and then eventually Leona worked there too. And one interesting thing, that's the first time we ever had turkey. When she worked at the garment factory at Christmas time, they gave the workers turkeys for Christmas. And so we had turkey for Christmas dinner. And that was such a special treat. And Adeline was one who just gave so much of herself. She, as I say, she bought linoleum for the kitchen floor. She bought a refrigerator when They finally got electricity. She just shared so much. She bought a wagon for Louie and Clary to play with, and they'd haul hay in their little wagon. After we had kids, she did, bought clothes for them. And I don't know if you would remember this, but when she was living in Grand Rapids, took Ralph on an airplane from Grand Rapids to Alpena just to give him an airplane ride.
Wow.
Yeah, she did that. They went on a Friday and came back on a Sunday. And I can remember him saying, oh, he was so scared because they landed in Detroit and I think one other place. And so he was up and down, and he was just a little guy. But she just was that kind of a person who just did so much for other people. Yeah.
I know when I was little and couldn't have sugar, she would always bring me a chocolate bunny from the candy factory somewhere in Grand Rapids.
I remember she was always looking for sugarless candy for Corey.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just the way she was.
Yeah.
She was a wonderful person. And I guess I was close to her in that way. Well, she was just 10 years old, and she was baking bread and doing that kind of thing at home. So she was like a kind of like a mother in a way. Aunt Leona, she worked for Uncle Adolph and Aunt Clara. Aunt Clara had TB and had been at the TB hospital, I think it was in Howell, Michigan. And then when she came home, she was very weak. And so Leona worked there, cooked and cleaned and so forth. That's the only job that I remember Leona had. I'm sure she did other things, but that's what I remember. And Florence worked at, there was a store in Heron. It was called Dagy's store. She worked there. I think she worked mostly in the house to do the housework, but she worked in the store some too. And one evening they brought her home. She had been washing walls, and I don't know exactly how this happened, but they must have stuck their needles alongside of the door frame instead of in a pincushion or something. Anyway, she was washing walls and she got a needle caught in her elbow. It was in the bone and they couldn't get it out. So they brought her home, and my parents had to take her into Alpena to a doctor. And it was evening, so I don't know how they got a doctor, or if they took her to the hospital, that I don't know. But to take that needle out, that's something that stands very clearly in my mind. And she also worked at a place called Ferris's. There was a little cafe not too far from where the police post was. And it was just a kind of a cute little cafe, and there was a cabin in the back in the woods, and she stayed in that cabin by herself at night. And this little cafe served hamburgers and that kind of thing. And I, in the summertime, stayed with her a lot of the time, and I even helped in that little cafe. I would make hamburgers and wait on customers and stuff, but Florence was always so good at cooking. She did a good job, and of course then later as she was older, she cooked at school. Noted for her wonderful cooking and baking,
Yes.
as you know.
Yes. Those kids at Sanborn School were spoiled.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
got home cooking from Aunt Florence.
When I taught there were two cooks also, but they didn't do like Florence did in the kitchen. because she, baked, did everything from scratch. It was wonderful.
So what would you want future generations that watch our documentary, what would you want them to know about your family, growing up in the Kindt family at the farm?
Love is very important. Working together is very important. Sharing what you have with others is very important. Our mother just gave so much of herself. She had so little, but what she had, she gave. I remember she gave milk to the neighbors, shared food. My Aunt Annie, who was my dad's sister, had breast cancer surgery. With all of us kids in that house, she had Aunt Annie come and live with us as she recuperated. And my mother took care of her. So I would want future generations to know, give of yourself. Don't think highly of yourself, but give of yourself. What God has given you, share with others. And I feel it's very important to have God in your life. Don't let your children go without knowing who Jesus is. That's what we learned. We went to church every Sunday, and we sat in this pew. It was a big pew, and we'd all sit there, and it was German, but it just warms my heart when I remember how my mother and dad sang. My mother had such a piercing voice, and my dad had a good voice. But being in church together, singing together, worshiping together, that is so important. And so much of the time it's forgotten today.
Anything else you want to add?
I'm just so thankful that I was born into the family I was born into. I know God had a plan, and that was the plan, and it just all is a blessing. I always thought I would someday like to be a pastor's wife, and God made that happen. I had a wonderful husband, and with him we had 4 wonderful kids. Just such a blessing. And I would want future generations to keep those things in mind. That's what's important.